Hi, and welcome everyone to today's podcast episode of our Waves of Change podcast. In this episode, I have the great honor to have with me Abhayraj Naik. Abhay is an educator, activist, and community builder. He's passionate about decolonial climate justice, transformative learning, and spiritual ecologies. In this episode, we'll be speaking about his journey, his approach to education, and the possibilities of intentional community life. Welcome, Abhay.
Thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited for our conversation.
I'm also really excited about it, really looking forward to it. And the first question that I want to ask you is the question, who are you? Maybe you want to describe a little bit about what it is that you do, what it is that you're excited about.
Thank you. So, I love to speak about where I'm going to when I'm now asked about who I am. And I think I'm somebody who is fervently working towards a world without suffering. I'm somebody who's very much committed to the path of the Bodhisattva, imagining that one day it might be possible to ensure that all beings are no longer suffering, they are healthy, they are happy, they're in their most beautiful selves. And I today have a role to play in that. And how I sort of put efforts into this journey would be by being an educator. So I work with formal and informal spaces of education. I'm an activist. I mostly commit my energies towards environmental and climate justice activism, but I'm interested in the entire range of social justice activism that the world offers. And I think what really brings me also to this community is I'm a community builder. I'm quite clear in my mind that it's small groups of people living together in ways that are intentional, loving, caring, but also very, very mindful of the work that we have to do in the world that will bring about the change. And I see my role in building community as well.
What do you enjoy most about this role of building community, as you were saying?
Mm. I think what comes to me as the most enjoyable part would definitely be the slightly awkward, slightly unsure, but very, very potent and creative tenderness of seeing who joins the cause, who especially who is willing to step into that space of unknowing, uncertain, but at the same time optimistic and hopeful coming togetherness, right? And I like being the person who holds that space, who welcomes people in, who occasionally allays fears, resolves conflicts, presents not a complete vision, but at least an initial outline of what are we meant to do together today, right? And I think that is usually the role I adopt in communities that I am proactively building. Of course, I've been blessed to experience community life in well established communities that have a long legacy, where even multiple decades have been invested in building up community culture. And in those contexts, I'm someone who's just trying to listen quite carefully to what are the rhythms of that community and how could I serve best. And I am a voracious learner, so I must say that I love the learning involved with the process as well, which is more of a selfish me thing. It's a personal thing, but that is an important part of making sure that I'm energized and I'm committed, and each day is exciting and delightful for me.
And which type of communities? What were you learning there? I'm curious about to learn what informed you in
Mm,
these communities and what were they like?
sure. So I have lived most of my life in India, and I continue to live and work in India for a good part of each year. And my primary experience has been with intentional communities, such as Auroville, for example, but much smaller urban intentional communities in the south of India, right? And what these communities are usually attempting to do would be to respond to the culture and environmental crisis that besets either the city or the country or the world at large. And I tend to usually prefer working with smaller emergent communities in the early years, though, of course, I've learned a lot from, as I mentioned, Auroville. There's another beautiful community called Navadarshanam, whose name translates to New Direction, which I've visited and been a part of over very many years. But I'm not sort of wedded to only one kind of community. I mean, what I mean to say by that is, even when I'm a teacher within the university context, I'm keen to build up a community within the faculty, the researchers, the students, and the people and the life forms that are around the university campus. And those are quite often slightly mm, emergent processes, but they're also not your exact uh, picture of a group of people living together. They are people living in their own spaces, but coming together for discrete causes, but aligned by that community ethos, aligned by a purpose, and most importantly for me, aligned by a kind of full body sense that we are here to do something that is important, something that is serious, something that is required, and it is something that we can only do together. We can't do this individually or not. And just to end my response to this, I mean, this is the more regular and more sustained India focus, even when I am heading to India actually tomorrow. And one of the first things I'll be doing, even before like settling into Bangalore city, will be taking a trip to a nearby uh, uh, land which a group of people have just purchased. There's a beautiful river, I'm told, and that is where a new community is going to be created. And I'm just going to go there, and I'm one of these few people who are, in a sense, responsible for the origins and growth of this community. And I'm just going to meet my other community builders and meet the land, explore the river, and just get an initial sense of what might be possible. So, to complement the India experience, for very many years in North America, in Canada, in Western Europe, and most recently in Sweden, I've been making friends with other examples to live and learn with, which is communities such as Emerge, but also communities that are of different sizes or are more located in wilderness. And I'm constantly going into these spaces with one, I'm interested in learning what has informed your own process so far. Two, I'm also interested in being a part of this community potentially, because while I have some roots and some anchors in different parts of the world, I continue to keep it as an open question as to, especially when climate breakdown becomes more intense, and I do believe it will, where do I want to be living? Where do I want to actually have these friends and family to see these times that are really eruptive? And for me, it's also a very personal search outside of a learning mission. And so I go into these spaces also thinking, could I see myself living here in that hut there for a few years? Could I really be useful in this space? Is it connected enough to nature in ways that will satisfy my soul's craving for nourishment? All of those questions are also part of what animate me, and I'm constantly building these linkages without a clear timeline in mind for when that linkage might actually translate into a collaboration or a project or a flow of people from one place to the other. So yeah, that's a slightly longish response to how I go into these communities and what have been the learnings and what are the things I'm looking for when I engage with these communities.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. I find it very beautiful to see how you interact with communities and the thought process that you hold with them. And I wanted to ask you as well about the fields of education
Mm.
and research and yeah, the university context that you find yourself in. What is the topic that you're working with or most excited about?
Sure. Thank you so much. So, I am a lawyer by training. I am an amateur philosopher by practice. And I am a very, very keen, I would just say, a spiritual being in terms of my presence in the world. And I bring all of that into the university space. So, when I am teaching, I'm usually offering courses related to the environment or related to climate change, including environment and ethics or climate justice. My approach is decidedly transdisciplinary. I don't limit myself to law or to policy or to sociology or to literature or to philosophy. I think we need new formations of knowledge to respond to these very, very complex, very, very emergent phenomena in a world that is changing so fast. And I work with all levels. I mean, I currently am teaching undergraduates, but I teach postgraduate students as well. And I also like to work outside of the university space with adults who are interested in learning together. And apart from the subject matter, I think what I bring into the university space is also a slight disruption of what education is actually supposed to be. So sometimes you might enter a classroom where the timetable might say we're talking about environmental law and policy, and you'll find me and a group of young learners wrapped in a meditation position, right? And for me, it's all connected. I don't think you can do environmental work without having a kind of grounding in your own inner environment. I don't think you can do developmental work without having clarity on your ethical and moral compass, right? And so I bring in uh, embodied, somatic, but also healing modalities into the classroom space. And in India, but everywhere in the world, this is not something that formal education is fully comfortable with. So I'm sometimes met with by resistance from the students. Sometimes my colleagues are like slightly uncomfortable about my maverick educational style. But overall, over many years now, the rewards have been evident. People tell me, you know, thank you so much. That was so refreshing. I didn't have that experience at all in my university learning. And I would really, really, really want to take that forward into the rest of my life. And I just want to also say, for me, education itself is quite a sacred sphere of activity. I don't think of education lightly or my role as an educator lightly. I'm quite influenced by educational philosophers like Krishnamurti, who hails from India, who's quite clear that you have an evolutionary goal in and through the educational act. You're really uh, allowing yourself to be elevated to a higher sphere of being if you participate in the learning process well. And someone like Gandhi, today coincidentally is Gandhi's birthday. It's celebrated as a big day in back home in India. When he was inviting people to come and be in an ashram and live in an ashram and learn in an ashram, it was more than just learning about a subject. It was about learning about yourself, learning about your ancestors, learning about the land, but also learning about what might we dream of as a possibility for us collectively. And I like to go into my formal educational spaces with those kinds of inspirations and resonances. And it sometimes is choppy, it sometimes is challenging, but I think that's my work to do in these spaces. And I don't say this too much, and I don't think I've said this ever in a recorded format, but there is a desire somewhere down the line to also initiate a world learning space. I won't call it a university, but I do want to uh, be a part of an effort to build a new learning space itself, which is capacious enough for a sizable number of learners to pass through. And I wanted to be informed by my own experience as a educator and teacher and learner in formal and informal spaces. So you might, John, one day receive a email invitation. Please come and engage with our learners and my colleagues. I don't know where in the world this will be set up, but it's one of those longer term projects I'm slowly working towards.
I find it so exciting listening to you. And I just, in this conversation, I already feel the depth of your being, like on
Mm.
so many levels. And I would personally feel very honored to be one of the learners in this environment. I would
Uh,
definitely be part of that. I would love that.
a learner and a teacher, I'm sure, because I have learned so much from you already. Yeah, and that's how I see my role as well. I'm always a teacher and educator, but I'm also always a learner. And I really learned so much from young people and students and uh, even like the more than human life around me. I think my inspiration is constantly coming from places that are slightly uh, unusual in the sense they are sources that we have forgotten to listen to, right? Normally, of course, I learn a lot from elders, but I'm increasingly discovering that there is so much to learn from children. There's so much to learn from plants. There's so much to learn from taking a jump into the lake or the river and then just like really being open to what the world is trying to tell you. So yeah, I hear you when you say that you would love to be a learner, and I definitely would love for you to bring a lot of your magic as a educator and facilitator and teacher into that space as well.
Thank you so much. I would
Mhm.
definitely feel honored to be part of that.
Thank you.
And I was also wondering, I have so
Sure.
many questions. I have so many
Please.
questions.
Thank you. These questions are great because they really allow me to uh, crystallize some thoughts that have been more sketchy in outline sometimes. So thank you for the questions.
I have a personal curiosity around how this way of learning, I think you used the word like world school,
Mm,
would be informed by spirituality. And what would that look like? What
mm.
would these elements be?
Sure, thank you. So I think as you sort of frame the question, there would definitely be a deep connection between spirituality and the learning process. It wouldn't be something that's added on, but it would be part of the foundational constitution or ethos of the curriculum, the pedagogy, also the space, and the people who are welcomed into that space. Mm, I am not in any way drawn to one particular tradition. I think part of my own orientation is to really be open to learning with all traditions and to welcome the intercourse and connection between traditions. And I think over history, we've had many great human beings who have facilitated that, and a few centers of learning that have rooted that. I think of, again, an example from India, Shanti Niketan, which is the home of peace, which was something that the great Indian writer and artist Rabindranath Tagore set up along with so many other initiatives that he helmed. And there, in the foundational ethos, there was a invitation to all kinds of spiritual and religious traditions to make their way through those lands and classrooms. Mm, for me, I think also recognizing our contemporary predicament in a spiritual way is important. So I think what is important for me is to recognize that we live in a hyper technological world. We are beset by technology and we all rely on it and use it, and we are influenced by it in many ways. And the possibilities of exponential innovations, but also disruptions from technology, must have a spiritual counterpart, right? What kind of spiritual um, location do we want to have? What kind of spiritual resources do we want to have to lead us into a world which is increasingly transformed by AI that is so powerful and is stepping into so many domains of life, right? And so, not just technology, but also what kind of spirituality do we want to allow us to recognize that our current extractive, industrial, predatory way of engaging with nature and the world is coming to an end, right? We might like to pretend that it's business as usual, but the science does not lie, especially once you collaborate it across different kinds of scientific traditions, right? And there's no doubt that planetary boundaries and the Earth's carrying capacity is being breached. We're all seeing increasingly that there's climate and ecological events that are leading to shocks to people, to systems, to countries, to economies, to entire worlds, right? And so that requires, I think, I mean, of course, ancient spiritual traditions are ancient and are powerful because they are universal. They apply for all time. But I also think this moment calls for a creative spiritual answer to how do I want to be as the world is breaking down, ecologically speaking, around me. What kind of world do I want to welcome in, right? And so for me, the spirituality would be very, very informed by a connection with our dependence on the earth, but also our resourcing what we can access from the earth in a way that feels good and ethical, right? And I personally am a huge mm, a supporter of some kind of discipline with the spiritual practice. So I like the thought of like there being regular times for prayer or meditation or physical activity or reflection or even like unstructured time to be with nature, etc., etc. But it's too soon to say if these will be features of whatever results, because that's going to be a collaborative activity and that's going to be very, very responsive to that time, that land, and those initial set of people. So I might express this, but I might be persuaded by somebody who's even more tuned into what is required for that moment. And yeah, I don't think the origin or the east-west traditional, the history, the location matters beyond the point, because I think across all traditions there are certain things that are very, very powerful and common, and those would be invited into the learning space. And I do want it to be world, global, international. I do want to, uh, as much as possible, free us from the sometimes negative limitations of thinking in terms of nationality, right? And I do think there's so much that the planetary wisdom offers us, and that would be important to bring into that space as well.
I'm so curious what brought you to where you are now.
Mm.
What was the path, your journey to being in this very moment, like this human being with these different experiences and interests? Maybe you could take us on a little journey, Abhay's journey.
Wow. All right. Thank you for that question. So I think Abhay was a very studious and serious, sometimes almost pedantic, too serious student in school, uh, who had a secret side which was all about uh, immersing himself in nature, right? I really loved when I had the chance to, alone most often, but sometimes with companions, go out and explore the inner world of trees or grass or birds or spiders, da 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 da. And of course, those early years were tolerable only because of this time spent with nature, right? For me, my background growing up in India and going to a prestigious school in India meant that I was constantly subject to a very, very competitive force field, a very fear inducing force field, right? And many, many years after I've finished off at school, I continue to realize that that model of education that I was a part of continues to have markings on my system, on how I react to things. So that was where the seed of surely there must be another way in which education can happen initially were planted. Though in very, very superficial ways, that schooling helped me. I got great opportunities. I became fluent in the basic disciplines that one is supposed to know as a young learner. I built, as a young person, even a good network. I think where it really mattered in terms of my inner resilience, my sense of self, even how I related to the other, that education was damaging, right? And soon after I graduated from school, I uh, decided that what I want to do is not just reform the education system, but there was always, as a very young person, also a sensitivity towards suffering, right? And though I didn't have the language for it then, I knew that going to law school and being a person who is capable of working with the law would help me with both reforming education systems as well as in responding to injustice and suffering, right? And so, just to fast forward the story a little bit, law school was a great experience. Of course, it was very, very formative for me. And near the end of my law school experience, I had the first of what has happened now, maybe thrice in my life, a moment that can be best described as a paradigm shift, but in a slightly uncontrolled way. Right? My entire world almost collapsed because eventually I reached such a sensitivity. I reached such um, a knowing about how what I was doing or what I was interested in was at odds with what a deeper part of me wanted to do. And I also became aware of how my own upbringing, how my own ancestral traditions, but also how being part of a modernist world, a world where competition, speed, hyper technology of everything, all of that, the performative element being more important than the authenticity, all of that had left marks on me. And early on in my life, just as I was graduating from law school, I had this moment which could be described as an epiphany or an aha moment. It was also me realizing that I was connected to the natural world very, very deeply. I could I could actually listen to what the world was telling me, but at that young age I didn't have the maturity and the capacity to sit with that and be like, okay, I can listen to what the world. I was like, oh my God, the world is telling me things. What do I do with it? Can I understand? Do I need to listen more? And so there was a first aha moment, right? Where I really, at the other end of that experience, which was traumatic and quite disruptive to my established way of life, to my family, I came out of it as a new person in the sense that I really had clarity on what I wanted to do, what was important, what was not, right? And so most of my life after then has been as a professional teacher, as an environmental activist, as someone who works with communities who are in need of support for environmental justice, but also someone who was building up small initiatives, including in the cultural space around literary magazines, who was building out a sense of community in the city I was then living in, right? And this continued for a long time, and this led to many different places in the world. It led to different kinds of academic projects, different kinds of social entrepreneurship initiatives. And then once again, I like to think of me as spiraling into myself, which is something a elder once told me in a learning session. Once again, many years later, and this is quite recent, about 7 or 8 years back, as a successful academic, successful social entrepreneur, a globally networked person, I suddenly realized that what I was doing was still not aligned with my true inner calling, right? And there was still a little bit of slippage and leakage and a little bit of, for lack of a better word, posturing. There was me doing things that were not really connected with my source energy or really aligned with who I was meant to be in the world. And once again, there was a rupture, right? And by this time, I had met my life partner, and she was quite supportive through this. It was also a different context where I had all these responsibilities to the students I worked with, the communities I worked with. But as a result of the second aha moment or epiphany, I became very convinced that I want to be working with transformative or paradigm changing spaces, modalities, and people. I don't want to be moving things around to reform a system that is at its core rotten and toxic, right? And that was, I think, just the courage that came from that clarity I found so liberating, right? And so where you find me now is where I'm trying really to um, live with that courage and act with that courage, not return back to the slightly more uh, calculative, slightly more afraid earlier me. And this path takes me to places where the path is really uncharted because nobody really knows how to change the world. If we did, it would be happening all the time, and it's incredibly rewarding because I now meet people who are so precious, and I know that they're so rare in the world, and the learning curve is so much steeper. And in, I mean, there's no way to overstate it in every faculty, in terms of creativity, in terms of beauty, in terms of intelligence, in terms of material resources, in terms of global cultural diversity, but also just in terms of the sheer wow, this is spectacular feeling in me, being true and trying to stay true to what I think is very, very aligned with my deeper calling. And that deeper calling is one where I don't want anyone or anything to suffer anymore in the world, right? It's a massive want. But staying true to that, and then quite, I wouldn't say mercilessly, but almost without overthinking it, just letting go of all those things that are not fitting that agenda has been so powerful for me. And that's where I am a part of Emerge. That's where I'm building up this longer term learning center. I currently also steward a center for spiritual ecology, which is setting out little nodes in different parts of the world. The desire is to very much root it in India and have these connections and collaborations with partners and communities of practice in different parts of the world. And I don't know, maybe one day the Center for Spiritual Ecology, which exists, it exists, but in a small way, will become this learning space, this healing space, this transformative space. Yeah. So that's been my journey in a slightly accelerated way. During the course of that journey, I've become more comfortable in my skin. My hair has changed a lot. I've learned to smile without feeling more conscious about it. And definitely, my ability to relate with the more than human world has gotten subtle and nuanced, and it's really exhilarating in terms of constantly being in dialogue with the world around you.
Thank you for taking us on this journey, Abhay. I find it
Mhm.
super fascinating. And I can imagine that people listening or watching might ask themselves, wow, how did he connect more and more with his deeper calling? What supported him? Maybe some people listening have the same longing. And I'm wondering if you have yeah, some ideas or impulses that you could share for your from your own experience, what supported you on this journey of reconnecting more with your own inner calling.
Thank you. I definitely can, and I would love to. I think number one on my list of things that supported me would be the advice and guidance and generosity of good people. And that's the advice I offer to anybody who asks me as well, especially somebody who's starting out the journey or is slightly lost in the journey. The single most important thing that you can do is hang out with the right people, right? And it's not my great insight. I think the Buddha said this as well. Keeping the company of good people is, of all the things I say, this is very, very important. And for me, I sort of cultivated that as a practice. I was lucky to have good mentors, good teachers, good role models along the way. And I didn't have any shame or any stress in copying what they were doing, accompanying them and trying to do exactly that and learning through that process, right? So I think in our modern cultural register, sometimes copying gets a negative tag because everybody must be original all the time. And for me, it's important to remind people that actually sometimes copying is the way to learn, especially copying a wise teacher or a master or an expert, learning from somebody who can really teach you. Um, for me, I think also meditation has been profoundly transformative. I have been meditating for most of my life, and from being trained in yoga and meditation. I mean, I attended regular classes as a young person to the last decade or so, where I've really dived deep into meditation practices from across traditions. So I'm interested in Kashmiri Shaivism, which is a particular strand of thinking through meditation and what it means to be alive in the world. I'm interested in Buddhist traditions around meditation, particularly what's called the Dzogchen Tibetan tradition, where you're really invited to think of what might it mean to be living through each and every moment of life as an opportunity for meditation, right? As an opportunity to be aligned with your true self. Um, and yeah, I would say one other big influence for me has been these, what I alluded to earlier as these aha moments or these epiphanies. Those were uh, painful moments, those were difficult moments. And initially, there was a resistance in me to take those as learning moments. There was more, let me switch to so sad for me. Oh, I'm confused. Life is difficult now, right? The moment in my head, there was a switch that I can learn something from this. In fact, this is happening to me because there is a lesson for me. Mm, that really changed things. And now that's a part of my standard operating procedure in life, right? I miss the bus. I say, oh, there's a learning for me. So, I mean, it could lead to also sometimes being very casual about things. But the deeper point is, even if things are painful, failure occurs, especially in, I would say, when what you in your old worldview presume to be a failure occurs, there's something there that the universe is trying to tell you, right? And I have been comfortable with sort of listening to the clues that the universe gives me about what my purpose is. And I do seriously believe that the universe is telling everybody what is your purpose, what is your goal, where are you meant to go to next. We've lost, many of us have lost the capacity to listen to that, right? And so for me, mm, very high up on that list again would be a long and it's still ongoing process of uh, deepening and enhancing my listening ability, right? I have a long way to go, but definitely giving that attention, really leaning into how am I listening, what am I listening to, what can my body listen to in this situation, what is not being said here, what happens if I don't think of time in the way of like, oh, it's limited, I have only 20 minutes, or I have such a short lifespan? What happens when I really allow myself to listen to what the universe is asking, not just of me, but asking of the moment as well? And staying with that, sometimes it can be dissatisfying. Sometimes it can be like, okay, I figured it out. These are the set of practices I have. There's no more to go to. But I constantly discover that it's a never ending journey almost. There's so much deeper that one can go to. And just to end this point, I think most recently, what really blew my mind was this idea from Australia. It's an Aboriginal idea. It's this idea that I think the precise term is Dadiri or Dadira, something like that. I'm not saying it exactly correct. The idea is that you don't really need to be doing things in the world. You just need to be listening and allowing yourself to listen, which is anyway part of what you do as an alive person. And then the universe will take you into its flow, right? And so that really requires you to chill out, to slow down, to allow for the universe to tell you what is coming for you next. And it has, I mean, this is a body of knowledge which is like, compared to most Western philosophy, 5,000 years, 6,000 years, this is like 20,000, 30,000 years. That's the vintage of this knowledge, right? And it is so much in tune with like these ideas of effortless action, being with the flow that we're all familiar with. So yeah, listening deeply to what my body is saying, what the earth is saying, what people around me are saying, and allowing that listening to give me the sign as to what I'm meant to do has been very, very powerful for me.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Um, Before, you've also been talking about communities. You've been talking about surrounding yourself with the right people. You've also been talking about exploring different communities. And now I wanted to take this segue towards our Emerge Lakefront community. And I wanted to ask you, what is it that attracted you to Lakefront, to this place where you've now been living here for a bit?
Thank you. So I think first and foremost, it was an invitation from a friend who you know, Stephen, who uh, sort of indicated that he and his partner Laura, who you know, were moving here. And the moment that invitation that they were moving here arrived in my inbox, I remember when I saw that, I too was thinking of, hey, I have a little bit of time until my next teaching engagement. Hmm, what shall I do to really make that time count for me and my work in the world? And that arrived almost in response to that like yearning or curiosity, right? And I'm familiar with both of their work, and in general, uh, am familiar with their larger community context. And this wasn't entirely new to me because I've been following the inner development goals ever since they were formulated. So, but I've been following them from a distance. I mean, I joined the online launch, and I'm familiar with some of the allied initiatives, particularly Perspectiva and the Realization Festival, etc. So when this news that a friend of mine was moving here, along with, hey, what am I going to do over these next few months to allow for my own journey to be awesome, not just good, like really good, along with, oh, this is actually a body of work that I'm in some ways connected with. At least there's a allied, the inner development goal framework, which, as you know, is quite prevalent with the thinking and practice of many people who are part of this community at Emerge Lakefront. And all of these factors came together even before my mind could like do the math and say yes, no, da 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 da. There was a sort of intensity of like, I want to go there too. And I wonder if I can go there too for this time that I have available, right? And this was quite, I think it was probably late in the day, and I then sort of voraciously dug deep into all available information on the community. I liked what I saw. I liked the fact that this was firstly metamodern. I quite often have been a little frustrated by the limits of postmodernism. I don't like an implication that nothing is useful and that there is no space for optimism and hope. By nature, I do believe that things are uh, going to get better and can get better if the right set of conditions are achieved. And personally, I have seen how a few committed people change the world through their actions, right? And I like the fact that this community was, it might not be so evident on the website or in how Emerge Lakefront presents itself, but at least some of the people involved with the establishment of the community had a clear philosophical and political stance, which was one that I resonated with. I won't say that I'm 100% metamodern. Sometimes I do like the suspicion and the critique that comes from the postmodern way, and sometimes just by ways of my own conditioning, I'm like, wow, this modern outlook is so refreshing. But as a intellectual, an academic, a researcher, the underlying body of knowledge that supported this work also felt good. And I've been curious about Sweden, the broader Nordic region for a while. I've not, before I came to Lakefront, I hadn't been here. And I was like, fast, but let's make it happen.
And
And
what would you say? And I know that in probably like within the next 24 hours, you'll be leaving towards India.
yes.
And I was thinking, if there's one, like, what is one thing of inspiration that you take from your stay here at Lakefront?
Mm.
If you have already reflected about that, I don't know. Maybe there's one thing.
Thank you. I mean, I haven't reflected about it yet, but I appreciate the opportunity to begin that reflection process, and it's something that I think will continually return different kinds of rewards. Um, I appreciate the fact that there is both structure as well as an openness for those who want to create structure here, and it the balance never uh, is sort of fixed. It's something that occasionally erupts in tension, but I like that constitutive setting. Personally speaking, as well, coming from India, having a brown body, not necessarily being of a nature where I'm like very keen to take the lead and have my voice heard when other people are speaking. I could be in spaces where I don't say anything, don't do anything. I'm just like witnessing and observing. But here, I think the the atmospheric design, which includes the space, but also the energies that people are bringing in to maintain the space, is one that not only reassures you and gives you things to do that are just enjoyable for you or useful for your own learning and development, but it also, in a way, invites you to try things out, to step up and like say, hey, I want to see if others might be interested in joining me on a conversation on it. For me personally, getting at that design, which is almost always an impossible task for everyone's satisfaction, has been done interestingly here. And I like the fact, I mean, I think the time is very important, but I like the fact that there is agency for everyone in the community to really step up and take the steering wheel of the ship, if you wish, right? It's not like, oh no, that's the captain's job and you can't be captain. Uh, but yeah, if you're there steering it, people might come and say, steer left, steer right, go fast, go slow. But the system allows you to do that if you want to do that.
Mhm.
And if you don't want to do that, you can rest assured that there are, I mean, community is so full of vibrant competent, creative leaders, there's always somebody who will be able to and would be willing to do that if you don't want to do that. So I found that good for my nervous system. I found that good as an invitation, especially for a person who's not usually very keen to speak loudly or to even have a chance to speak, who's okay with sitting back. I found it uh, a good design mix that allowed for a blooming or a cultivation or an offering. And I think that is something I'm going to take away from here. Uh, I'm probably going to sit with paper and pen or with my thoughts and really distill that down further. What is it that led to that? Was it the beautiful way in which the building is designed? Was it the presence of the lake? Was it the people? Was it the absence of like these are our principles and these are our rules, or just like an openness that we are going to figure it out together? I'm going to sit with that, and that I think it's too soon to say clearly what it was, but there is a magic here, which is a constructed magic that I think I'm taking a deep sense of, an experience sense of, and wherever I go, I want to allow for that magic to or a similar kind of magic to find space because it is, in my opinion, the right kind of magic that we need. It's the kind of atmosphere that allows for new frontiers to be imagined and new possibilities to be explored.
Thank you.
Mhm,
Speaking of new possibilities to
mhm.
explore, I know that there's one topic that you're especially excited about as well. And I wanted to jump to that topic as well
Yes.
of decoloniality.
Mhm.
Maybe do you want to share a little bit about what that actually means? Like, if people that are listening, like, sounds exciting, I would love to learn more about it. What is that?
Thank you so much, John, for the opportunity to get into a topic that's very, very dear to my heart. Um, in a nutshell, decoloniality is an approach that reminds us that there are many different ways of doing one thing or anything, and there is a continuous negative influence of an outdated imagination that has us believe that there is only one way of doing the right thing. So, decoloniality is both constructive or positive. It reminds us that there are many different ways to play. There are many different ways to construct something. There are many different and beautiful elements that create the world. It reminds us that of that. What is nicely, I think, signified by this word pluriversal, as opposed to universal, pluriversal, a world in which many worlds fit in, right? Which comes from the Zapatistas. So that is, for me, an essential pillar of decoloniality. But there's also the accompanying pillar, which is a slightly stark reminder that the effects of colonialism, the influence of colonialism, the underlying logic of colonialism, which is a logic that there is one way of doing things, and that one way is the way of the colonizer. That continues to have an effect and be present in all of us. It doesn't matter which country you're from, it doesn't matter if your country was a former colonizer or a former colonized. It doesn't matter if you're talking about your rules or your laws or you're actually talking about your inner consciousness, but that way of being in the world, that way of relating to oneself and the other is very much there. It's not gone anywhere. Right. And coming back to my application of, let's say, decoloniality to my work in India, I remind people in India that even though India received independence from colonial rule more than 75 years back, a colonial mentality is very much part of our institutions, our culture, right? And the systems we design. So everywhere there is almost a, oh, it's too difficult to work with difference. Oh, that's not the way it's done. This is the way it's done. Oh, There is only this logic of progress or growth or development, and it means this. And usually, the what it means is the way of the colonizer, which, as the history of colonization tells us, is usually Western European nations and North American nations, right? So this is a politics that I carry with me, and sometimes it's an uncomfortable politics. People are like, "Hey, I thought you were about community and lovey-dovey stuff. You're suddenly reminding me of this sort of pernicious influence of colonization." But I do think that the work that is most important for all of us is to decolonize our minds and bodies. Our minds and bodies have been colonized by an extractive, predatory, and historically powerful worldview, right? One which has us believe, for example, that nature is separate, nature's out there, nature's meant to be controlled. That is also part of a colonial imagination. And from there's so many elements, including uh, skin color or nationality or gender based difference, where there's almost an automatic assignment of quality or rank. So, what decoloniality does is, in teaching spaces for policymakers, but also for institution builders, for technology designers, there's no limit to where this body of knowledge and this force field can apply. It reminds us that, hey, maybe I'm thinking like this because some part of my mental model is colonized or is constructed by a colonial logic. And maybe I can sort of, for once, just sit back and see what happens when I bring in out of the box ways of doing things. Or I can see what happens when I sort of refuse to say that this is the correct way and I allow for the correct way to emerge, right? So decoloniality is totally aligned with an emergent way because you can't know in advance what is correct. You have to, like most good systems thinkers would have you do, you have to go into the system. You have to use Donella Meadows' words, you have to go down the rabbit hole to understand where the actual correct answer is. And that's what I bring in with my own use of the word decoloniality. And it, of course, draws from a rich tradition, particularly of thinkers, scholars, and activists from South America. But there are decolonial practitioners everywhere, right? Including at Emerge Lakefront. And it's so nice to recognize that there are people who are really willing to heal themselves and through that process willing to heal the world by letting go of these colonial parts of oneself. These are parts of oneself which actually are blocking us from our own capacities which I love the thinker Vanessa Andreotti's work. She talks about, and there's a lovely collective called Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures. They use this language of recovering our exiled capacities, right? What that basically means is, if only we allowed it, all of us could be listening to what the universe wants of us by just being with the plants and the water and the earth out there. All of us could actually be in a relationship of care rather than in a relationship of domination and extraction, right? And I think this is what I like to bring into different contexts. And sometimes it makes me stand out, especially because sometimes people want conversations to be very, very sanitized and happy and without rupture. But I do think we need a rupture with uh, colonial processes, right? And this is happening in the world. And sometimes, without going into the language of or the practice of violence, how does one theoretically, but also through practice, allow for a decolonial space to open up, right? And so I believe that at Emerge Lakefront as well, there are decolonial fields that have opened up. And they were there before I came, and I have hopefully contributed to them. And I think for any place that wants to actually bring about the advent of a new civilizational form, right, which maybe emerges, going to play a small role in, along with so many other beautiful alternatives across the world. It's important to have a clear recognition that what is often blocking us is that colonial imaginary, which is there in our bodies, it's there in our mind, it's there in our reactions, and it's very much there in how our laws, our policies, and our international relations are structured.
Thank you so much, Abhay. I'm really excited now about this topic, and I have the feeling we could do at least like 2 or 3 more podcast episodes just on this topic
Oh,
with
thank
you.
you for your interest.
And I was thinking, as this episode is slowly coming to a close, how, like, if someone listening right now says, "Ah, that is amazing. I want to know more. I want to learn more." How could people maybe learn more from you or stay in touch with you? There's a possibility that I add some links, for example, in the description. Is there anything that you want to share around that? How people could learn more? And maybe it's also from other people, whatever you feel most
Sure.
fitting.
Thank you so much. So I would definitely invite anybody who's interested in the topic to just take this question of how am I in my immediate surroundings? It could be even like in my own community house or just like in a walk around the neighborhood. How am I seeing nature actually misbehaving, actually breaking out of the lines, actually showing us that there are there is one imagination of control, and then there's life which is always escaping that control, right? Because that at the heart of it is what a decolonial vitality is about. It is this refusal to be fully mapped out, controlled, surveilled, and put in a box. It is this constant departure and escape, flights of fancy, flights of openness, what many would call seeds of a new renaissance, right? That's so, and you see it. You just like if you just go around and like there's a colleague of mine from India called Suprabha Seshan. She takes people on a walk to show them misbehaving plants, right? And the hope is one day that we will plant misbehaviors in a good way. That is, people becoming more alive through that. So that's an activity I definitely recommend, and you can do it multiple times, but do it with this intention. I'm looking for uh, a proliferation of life, of diversity, of boundaries and borders in some ways being opened up, of cracks emerging, right? There is an excess which cuts across the box and takes you into a new space. Um, like I mentioned, the work of uh, the scholars in the space, including the collective on gesturing towards decolonial futures, Vanessa Andriotti's work, I find very, very powerful. I personally am super influenced by the work of Gandhi and Tagore, but also uh, thinkers in the religious and spiritual traditions who offered a counter position to established religion, right? So, for my part of the world, in the 11th and 12th century, there were these saints and poets and poetesses who came from a very, very uh, mm, uh, a position which was very much amongst the regular people. Sometimes they lived lives which were, very, very modest and uh, not coming from elite backgrounds, and they offered ways of thinking about God, about spirituality, about one's role and duty in the world that was an alternative to mainstream Hinduism. So, in your own religion of interest, or it could be in multiple religions, you'll see that there is always a reformation or a counterpoint, right? Like I think, at least in the Christian tradition, I think of Saint Francis and what he offers, the patron saint of ecologists, right? What he's offering as another paradigm of relating to nature, which some would say is not present enough in mainstream Christianity, right? Um, so I have personally benefited from careful study of these moments where within a spiritual tradition, there's been a course correction or a splintering, right? And I am also very interested and influenced by the work of thinkers, as I mentioned, like Gandhi and Tagore. You will find in their corpus very clear statements of what it means to do things in a different way, to do things in an authentic way, to do things which at the end of the day are liberated things, right? The uh, uh, thinkers of education have gone into the same space. How do we free up and decolonize education, right? So these would be some of the references. I am, of course, very happy to be in conversation with anyone who might like a conversation, and you can find me on most of the social media platforms. You can send me an email. I'm happy to have my email shared, and would very much also welcome many of these conversations where we can sit across each other, have a chat, maybe enjoy a moment in nature as well, to really learn with what the world is offering us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Abhay. Thank you so much for being here today, the guests on the
Thank
Waves
you.
of Change podcast. Thank you. And I wish you a wonderful trip to India.
Thank you. My pleasure.